Listeners everywhere, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, the weekly fix for your screen addiction and a trusted source for discussion of all things film and television. Please keep in mind that for the purposes of this podcast, Joel and Ryan are not acting as journalists, but rather fellow moving picture enthusiasts. All of their opinions should be taken as such. Also, please be warned that while Joel and Ryan may seem like petulant children, they are, in fact, adults who may occasionally use adult language. While they promise to bleep out all the worst words, it's a good bet you will still understand what they were saying. And now, with no further ado, here's Joel and Ryan.
Hey, everybody! Welcome. Welcome to the Movie Show with Joe and Ryan, and of course we have our special. We're gonna have an accompaniment. We're gonna have our own little orchestra, are we? Oh, isn't that? Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. I am Joel.
And I'm Ryan.
And we have our
Are you sure you're Joel before we move on to our distinguished guest?
I know. If you're watching the video feed, I have lost my luxurious Mike Donovan wig. I'm clothed, and that's also different. From the waist up, for if you were watching. As everybody who is a fan of the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan knows, I do every episode with no pants on. So we are back. We are V-free. It has been a glorious time spending the last 5 weeks discussing V, the original miniseries, and V, the final battle.
Pretenama. No.
And now we are moving on. We are going into the fantastic world of time travel. And the man who decided that it was time that we talk time travel is our very good friend, Rob Dunkelberger.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course, Rob. Thanks for being on. It's great to see you. And of course, if you were on the visual feed, you see that Rob has now officially been here so many dang times he gets his own tile. It's now a Movie Show with Rob, Joel, and Ryan. All right, so Rob, how is everything going? This was your brainchild. Our little discussion on a couple fantastic time travel movies today.
Yeah, no, I mean, actually, everything hasn't been going great, as you may have been aware. I had a bad April.
a slightly off-color April, yes.
I definitely appreciated the shout-out on one of the shows, the well wishes. That was really sweet. So thank you, guys. But yeah, I mean, Ryan and I have been trying to figure out a way to talk about these two movies. I think since last time I came up with the first show I was on, because Somewhere in Time, it takes place in a theater sort of, and we did one on theatrical, so that popped in. But Ryan's like, I want to save that for something different, and I agreed.
They both come up before in the show, but but not like this. This is really where they're going to be the star of this episode for sure, which is very exciting. Time travel romances, we'll call them.
Right. Double feature.
The romance, they're really almost more romances than they are speculative fiction to a lot of degrees.
Yes.
But that's it's the romance part of it that ties the two together, and at least in my head, which is fun.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna get to that, but first, Ryan made a little discovery this week that we feel we need to share with our audience. Something that completely has eluded us. But I guess speaking of time travel, we're gonna go back in time a couple years.
Yeah, Joel and I did part 1 and part 2 of the third part of a 4-part deep dive series into the works of Steven Spielberg. I believe I got that right. Joel, as those episodes went on, got really good at saying that, but it's a mouthful. And it's funny, so we just thought we would emphasize how convoluted that got. But that second episode never got posted. I'm not sure why. Some cut and pasting error on my part, because it's a really difficult thing to do. We posted the picture of Munich, the cover of the artwork. We pitched it as a new episode that was about this. It got shared to, I don't know how many podcasting sites we're on, a whole bunch of them. And it was a little weird. The very next episode we did was John Grisham film adaptations, and that's one of our least listened to episodes of all the time. And I'm always like, oh, that's weird. I mean, it's who knows, who knows what people care about or are interested in, but it seemed really, really strange that episode, like, people just tuned out, didn't care.
That is the line that they will not cross.
We will not tolerate John Grisham. Well, it turns out that not everybody, because some people pick and choose, but the people who sort of listened to the show in order had just listened to the John Grisham episode, so they all just skipped it. And that was the thing with the metrics, was that Spielberg episode 2.37, a lost episode, if you will, was posted as the Grisham one, which we recorded after. So really confusing to me how I managed that. I don't remember the details. We cut Spielberg short about halfway through. We must have recorded the rest of it the same day. We did that with one of those twofers, and that must have been it.
Yeah, I remember. Because
it's the only thing that explains this sort of weird.
Yeah, back in the before times when we would be in the same room, we're like, you know what? Let's just pause here, and we're gonna do another episode because we're just gonna keep talking because we had momentum, but we knew we needed to break the episode up. So
anyway, I'm gonna post it next week as an all new episode, or gonna do a Facebook post and all that. So to draw, if you're not caught up or you're not listening to this, but to our loyal listeners out there, it's really a bummer that I made that mistake, but because it isn't going to filter down to all the other websites out there. Apple Podcasts has got it. So some of the ones that are really big and active, they go hunting for new ones. Or updates or changes, and they update them very, very quickly. But some of them will never update them, so it'll always be wrong, which bums me out. But Podbean, which powers the movie show with Joel and Ryan, has it updated. Apple Podcasts for sure has it. So those are the two most common ways that we're listened to. YouTube doesn't, because there's no visual part of the show to that. But maybe we'll do just a YouTube video, just to get the thing its due. Joel and I go over, in that episode, we go over Catch Me If You Can, War of the Worlds, The Terminal, and Munich. And it's an awesome episode. Those are some films we have, particularly me with Munich and Joel with Catch Me If You Can. Like, there's a lot of enthusiasm for the work. And then I'll just say one more thing, you guys. Now, you're listening along. I know you're out there. I know exactly how many people listened to that episode, actually. And it just, the wrong episode starts, and nobody told us all this time.
You're looking at me, aren't you?
Well, you were included, but no,
I don't know how I did it either.
Directly at you. Although, it's 70 some people that listened to that episode that did not listen to the Grisham episode. That's how many people were like, oh, that's messed up, and didn't say anything or make a comment or just do anything. They all, 70 something of you just thought, I don't want to, oh, bummer, I don't get to hear the second Spielberg episode, but whatever. And you just went on with your life.
Mm-hmm. It does. It is also a confirmation that my mother indeed does not listen to this podcast.
Because she would have pointed it out.
She would have absolutely pointed that out to me.
Yeah, my mom. My mom's nice and likes and shares the post, but she doesn't.
Let me respond for 70 people.
Well, 77 people, actually.
That's
weird to me.
I don't know how that would have happened.
there's no way you could have ever listened to the second part of the
wrong.
Spielberg deep dive, even though we pimped it everywhere saying that's what it was.
Yeah.
If you clicked on those links everywhere you listen to podcasts, you'd have been taken to the wrong thing. And it's understandable that y'all didn't listen to the Grisham episode when you had just listened to it,
Right.
mislabeled as a different podcast. And the stick-to-itiveness of the folks who actually listened all the way to the end of the second Spielberg episode when it turned out to have nothing to do with him is kind of cool. So, I still love all of you guys. It's not about that.
Yeah, we're not mad. It's just it's weird.
We're just a little disappointed in you
think
for
if
letting
I'd
us look dumb like
realized-
that for like 2 calendar years. That's a little irritating.
I think if I'd realized at the time, I would have sent you guys an email or something.
you
So
would
for
have.
some reason,
Yeah,
I
'cause
didn't
you-
realize.
Yeah, you
would have.
always reached out when you've had thoughts on stuff. So something.
So it's weird.
Who knows?
I must have been so far behind, like a week or 2 behind.
That's
and then
all
just
it
catching
takes
Up, I just
is that
went to the
you're-
next one, and
Yeah. And the way people listen to these things, they sort of log in and it just takes them to where they left off at the last one. We let these episodes run long because we were really wanted them to be around an hour. And then they were very consistently around an hour and 20 minutes. And now they've been 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours. As Rob said, every episode doesn't have to be 2 hours. We're going to shoot for making this one a little under 2 hours. But we did have a lot of fans say, I don't really care. You guys seem to stress a lot about how long they are, and we don't really care. We don't listen to them all in one shot. You listen to them when you're commuting, in the background at work, like the radio. That's how people experience podcasts. We get that. So we've let ourselves off the hook, but perhaps we've gotten a bit bloated. Those Spielberg episodes are fantastic. They're chock full of great stuff, and it's just the 2 of us, and they're just an hour and 20 minutes a piece. So it can be done.
Well, it wouldn't be the only thing that has gotten bloated over the last year.
That's true. I don't know how. I don't think we could have done the V episodes or some of these other ones any other way. But I think when you really commit to going through each moment or whatever, or if you commit to a 10-piece countdown per show. But this is just today. It's just 2 movies and some video talk and some other fun stuff, and we got Rob. I don't know how you're feeling, mate, but you look great.
Yeah, you do. You look good.
I'm feeling 100% better. So
that's awesome.
That's great news.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's jump into it, gang. Let's today we're going to be talking about a couple beautiful romantic films that have to do with love that spans the time, that has no decade. Love is eternal. And no, we're not talking about The Notebook. But we are going to be talking about 2 beautiful classic films. One of them, the first one. Well, we're going to talk about Time After Time, not the Cyndi Lauper song. But we're going to talk about the movie, the 1979 movie, Time After Time. And but first, we are going to talk about the glorious, romantic, gauzy film, like gauze-lensed film, beautiful Mackinac Island of Somewhere in Time.
When that one come out? 81?
80.
80. So
Yeah.
they really are really close.
Yeah, they are.
Kissing cousins.
Yep.
Um,
And I mean, maybe it's good to start off talking about the concept of double features.
Sure.
I know I love
Good. Good idea. Yeah.
when I'm having somebody over or getting together with a group. I've got a couple of groups that we try and get together monthly or so to do something. It's really fun if you can schedule a double feature. You try and find a theme, or for some reason they're just joined together. For this one, and Ryan, you've talked about
Soderbergh's Che speaking, looking at me on the wall back there. You ever make your friends sit through that double feature?
No,
That's a mean one. I have that too. Don't get me wrong. I don't have it as prominently displayed as you, but I definitely do have it. That's kind of. I'm sorry. I just thought of it.
Right.
I'm like, hey, that's a double feature. That's 2 movies for the price of 1.
Well, and Ryan, you pointed out, like, for you with a double feature, it's important that they're in the same era, sort of, or whatever.
I don't know that it's important for me. It maybe isn't, but I'm OCD about it that's how I sort of experience things and mix things. I find things that are way out of era or super not related. Like it feels incongruous and random to me, which I don't like. I always like there to be a reason for it. I think part of the fun of thinking up double features for your friends is to have some connection, but it doesn't necessarily have to be era, and they shouldn't be so similar that you feel like you watch the same movie 2 times over either. I mean, that's variety is key to it working, right?
You don't want to remake. Let's watch this and the remake.
Let's watch Psycho and then the shot-for-shot remake of Psycho.
But, like a fun double feature for me that really goes to totally different eras would be like the Maltese Falcon and Brick.
Sure, that's fun.
Yeah, that'd be a fun.
That's fun. I can see how that would be really cool.
Yeah. So I love to program those. I think you might too.
I do.
Even if it's just for yourself, pairing a good, making a good night of a nice pairing or whatever. So
an easy way to make a double feature, if you don't want to give it too much thought or you just want to start out, is literally to take 2 movies that came out around the same time that are totally different and just stick them together. And then they feel like you went, to me, that feels like you went out to the
movie theater or
to the drive-in and you watched a double feature. You know what I mean? That's the double features of my past, Bird on a Wire and Total Recall was one. So those movies they're nothing alike, but they're from the same summer, and they're just sort of connected in my head because I really did see a double feature of those. That sort of thing, to me, that's why there's era stuff involved. I enjoy that,
and that makes sense. And for these two, I mean, there's a thematic key to these two, definitely. There's a
sort of
concept.
multifaceted thematic connection.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they're from the same time period. I fell in love with them at the same time. So there's that personal connection too, is these played on cable over and over when I first had cable. Mm-hmm. And they've been linked in my mind since I was 10 or whatever.
Both were considered fairly successful films because they were both very modest productions.
Yeah.
But they, like a lot of films from that era, that the golden era of cable TV, basically. Yeah. They found their audiences truly on HBO and on Showtime or whoever was playing them during that, when those companies were desperate to show whatever, and they played these films over and over and over.
Mm-hmm. And somewhere in time, I was reading like one of the first pay channels that, along with HBO, was like Z Entertainment or something like that in New York, and the guy who ran Z Entertainment was so in love with Somewhere in Time that he programmed it. It was programmed like 16 times in 1 week to play at different times throughout the day.
That is Beastmaster level.
And that is where it found its audience. At the time, this was Christopher Reeve, the Superman, and everyone loves him as Superman, and most people can only see him as Superman.
Well, he was a guy who went from being nobody to being a huge star overnight, and then I believe this really was his second film after the Superman success, the second movie that he made after that.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't have, I mean, you can't rewrite history. I mean, he wouldn't have been considered for this without that.
Right.
Obviously,
Yeah.
people weren't sure how big a star he was going to be, but he was this tall, good-looking, charismatic guy who took the world by storm in Superman. He is, say what you want about his inability to sort of shed that role, he did give a lot of interesting performances and make a lot of cool movies. Especially, I believe he made the most out of that era, between Superman and Superman 2 and just after, where that whole string of films there, he's really picking things and doing things carefully to do something different. This guy,
not to get typecast.
Right, exactly. Not to be typecast. And then, of course, you get to the point in your career where you're happy to just give me whatever, tall, good-looking hero role you have. I'll do it. Like the pressures on you from a career aspect change. You know what I mean? So it's this beautiful story, and we'll get to kind of how it was received and how it did when we're at the end of talking about it. Joel, don't let me move past that, because it is kind of interesting how the producers and stuff see how this film was received, because it's a weird movie that was almost that nobody gave a care about when they started working on it. In fact, nobody wanted to do it. They negotiated the budget down to a nickel. They just were obligated. They had the guy who was running Universal at the time owed Jeannot Swark a favor, because he came in and it was widely recognized as saving Jaws 2, which at the time made the we talked about this in our Jaws episode. Yeah. He was given a marker, like literally, he was given a marker and saying, "Hey, you took on John D. Hancock's, his credit, his fee, his everything. You weren't able to negotiate your way into this in any way. But we think you made a genuinely good movie. It was one of the top 5 films of, nobody thinks Jaws 2 is as good as Jaws. I don't think they really thought that at the time, but it was a huge hit, and it was considered a fairly good movie. And if anything, its reputation, I don't know, it's been kind of an EKG of a reputation on that Jaws 2 film, but it really is, I think, and part of this is the films that came after, right? The Jaws movies, which are really, love them or hate them, they're terrible by comparison. His sequel is considered pretty good, and that film was in real trouble. And he came in, he was patient with the effects. He was really, really good with the young cast that were carrying that film for the most part. They were the ones out on the ocean every day. It wasn't our heroes like last time. That was the long, complicated part of the shoot. And he just did this awesome job. Everybody loved him. He's a very lovable guy. You will not find anybody on the internet saying a bad word about him. He's just really cool. And this is his baby. And it's so cool that it is, because it's his best film without question. And he just was somehow, you have that magic. We talk about it all the time when you connect with a story, and he just wouldn't let go. They really tried to talk him out of it. They tried to make it so it almost couldn't be made. That way he would change his mind, but he just stuck with it. Every issue, every budgetary problem that he got thrown at, he took as a challenge that he met with a creative solution, and it made the film better at every step of the way. But the big first step was just standing his ground. And I'll tell you, that's something that directors don't do today. They just don't do it. Partly they're not in a position to do it. If you're doing Dark Phoenix and you're Simon Kinberg, and even if you've been in Hollywood for 20 years like he has, they're the boss of you. I mean, there's nothing you can do. You just have to do what they say. And even if you hate it, you just have to do it and do the best you can with it. And that film, of course, is this bland, dull, homogenized mess of a thing. It's not incompetently bad or anything. It's just flat. The creative life has clearly been drained out of it, despite these thousands of creative people that worked on the thing. You could just feel that the vision behind it was a compromised one. And that's because you're working on that scale, you don't get to call your own shots. Once they approved a tiny little budget for Somewhere in Time, and Jeannot went to work on it, casting, designing, there's not a lot of designing going on. Most of the costumes you see are vintage. They went and made it. They was in the little novella, or the little book that the movie's based on, the hotel that the primary action takes place in is that really cool one in San Diego that's featured in The Stuntman and some other movies.
Yeah.
Another vintage seaside hotel that has a lot of personality. But Mackinac Island was genius, because the wagons, the horses, everything's already there. The old style boats, the servants' costumes, it's already there. It's all already there. Everything's vintage. Everything in that hotel. There's TVs in there and stuff, but essentially they didn't have to do much to create this mysterious, wonderful world of the past.
Yeah.
And Mackinac Island is maybe just between Jane Seymour and Christopher Plummer as the third most important character in the thing. It really is the star of the show in a lot of ways.
That's an excellent point. I mean, that is an absolute excellent point. Mackinac Island is no cars are allowed there. It's just the whole idea. It's not just like a vacation destination. It's an idea. It's something you have to buy into when you go there. And it's
I showed this exact double feature to George last weekend. Yeah. As I was going to watch them again to refresh myself or whatever. And I've been periodically trying to show George some classic movies. He's sort of asked for it. So I feel like there's movies I haven't seen that I should see or whatever. So we've been, watching Casablanca and things like that, things they hadn't seen. And I said, these are both, I guess they're classics now because they're over 40 years old.
Right.
And I love them. So are you interested? He said, yeah. So we watched, and he said, wait, Somewhere in Time, is that the one that takes place at the hotel I was conceived in? Yes, it is. It is. I spent a long weekend. It was a murder mystery weekend. We participated very little in the murder mystery weekend because we were there because of Somewhere in Time, and to work on making another child. And it's a great place to be. It is like stepping back in time.
I thought you were going to say it's a great place to make another child.
Yeah. Well, wow. It worked.
That too. There's a romantic.
That too. It is. Yeah.
There's a romantic take your mind off the rest of the world sort of error to the whole thing. And,
yep. And there's rules and it may have changed in the 18 years since then.
If anything, it's more strict now than it was then.
You had to dress for dinner. You had to wear a jacket. And women had to wear dresses. And so we had to buy clothes to go there for that weekend. And there's ballroom dancing after dinner. And I mean, it was a great weekend. It's a great place to go. I'd love to go back for another weekend sometime. I don't want to make any more kids, but I'll practice.
Yeah, I was gonna say you could go through the motions, I guess.
But all that aside, let's do what we do and kind of start at the beginning, because the 1980 aspects of this film are really pretty awesome as well, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
It starts out, it's this really, it's a very 70s style movie, even though it came out in 1980. In a way, it's timeless, but the present day stuff give you that feel of a late 70s drama / mystery, basically. Like the scenes at the theater, the party after the theater, the way they're shot, and the sort of cinema verite style of it, of the dialogue, because the film becomes a very formal thing. But the early goings, where we see this young college student who's just kind of seen his last big play staged, and he's going off into the world to make his mark artistically. It's this really neat. The scene just has this really lot of personality and a lot of cool energy to it. There's, it's only the only scene we see with this particular group of people. Some of the faces are recognizable. That's kind of
William H. Macy.
Yeah, to name one. There's a handful of them in it it's kind of cool, and they're all young people at the time. They're all, the famous people are all old people now. just it's very, very cool. And this weird thing happens where this old lady who's been sort of he's really clever the way he shoots this. There's nothing else in Jeannot's career that just shows this sort of I don't know what. And I really do think it's because it's a low budget film where once they said it was okay to make it, they kind of did just leave them alone, because why bother fussing over it? In a way, they're reducing the thing really helped him a lot, because he just was able to do whatever he wanted. He takes the time in this scene to establish this sort of figure in the background who's kind of waiting their turn to congratulate him. We're not sure. She's got this older lady that has like something of a nurse or something with her that's helping her along. And she comes up, and I'll let you, Rob, what is she comes up and kind of takes him by the hand and she looks him in the eye, and she says, say it again.
I think it's "Come back to me."
Come back to me.
Yep.
And she hands him this pocket watch.
Yep. That's part of the handshake. The watch is hidden in the handshake. And Reeves great in this moment. This old woman is fantastic, but Reeves is great because you can tell he's just sort of gobsmacked by it. It was a very simple thing, but something happened there, and he's not sure what it is, but he kind of becomes obsessed with it a little bit.
Yeah, that whole opening moment is really, I mean, you're right. There's this aura about the woman, because as she's slowly walking forward, everyone parts.
Yep.
You know, they're all partying. It's they're celebrating what, the opening night, I believe, of this play that he's written in college, and everyone's like, oh, he's so great, and then everyone just like stops as she parts, and she just walks up to him, and and no one knows who she is, and he doesn't know who she is, and then
the room, everything becomes still and quiet.
Yeah, and then she turns around and walks away, and everyone watches her go, and then they're like, okay, cake, so yeah, it's.
And then we jump forward a couple of years where
actually we follow her home.
Oh yeah, we follow her home.
We follow her home. She drives to the Grand Hotel. She goes to her room, and her companion, maid, whatever this person is like, are you all right? And she just doesn't.
Caregiver, we'll call her. That's what she would be considered today.
Yeah.
And,
she doesn't say a word.
She plays her music box, and she looks out the window, and that view that she sees is important because we're going to see it again.
Right.
Later in the film.
Yep. It's very, very cool.
And, we're going to be spoiling all over the place. That's the night she dies.
Right.
So that's the view she's looking at when she, when she passes.
So, so then we cut forward like 8 years, and Christopher Reeve's character, Richard, he's written several successful plays. He's plugging along. He's in this beautiful, this beautiful.
It's like a Lakeshore Drive,
Drive
kind of condominium building right on Lake Michigan in Chicago. It's very cool.
It's very cool.
Even for a late 70s apartment, it's very even by when you look at it today, it still feels very modern and chic. It's very neat.
It's really great.
I like that design aspect to it. I love his little out of time car that says something about him. And we're only in Chicago for a couple minutes, but it just feels kind of magical in a cool way. Like you feel that he is tapped into the world. He's this artist in the big city. His interactions with his agent, they're kind of fun, but he's kind of suffering writer's block and doesn't know how to get inspired for his next thing.
But you're right. You feel this sense of the modern world, a modern man with all these pressures.
Yep.
And the hustle and bustle of Chicago.
Right.
And he's getting away from all that. And that's what
they don't have time or money for a scene where he's interacting with crowds on the street or anything, but the film still does a very good job of putting him right in the heart of, a Lakeshore Drive address is, if you're a Chicago, if you're somebody of note in Chicago, that's a good spot to be, basically.
And I like that you put out, he's got this vintage convertible car. When he's frustrated, he listens to classical music. He's not listening to disco or whatever. He's he's this old soul. He's this, we get this, they get that established in these moments. Yeah. And the drive. And so he's like, I'm getting out of here. I got to go somewhere. I don't know where I'm going to go, but I'm going to get out and essentially clear his head, look for inspiration. He's got to go and see if he can figure out what he's going to write about. And then we get some great Chicago things of him driving along Lake Michigan,
heading out of town to get inspired, basically.
Which takes him randomly to this. He's driving by and he sees this old hotel, and then he stops the car in the middle of the road and backs up. Thank goodness there's no traffic.
The film doesn't mention Mackinac, it's just this place that he stumbles upon. It's somewhere in Illinois or Michigan or wherever he is, or Wisconsin probably. That it feels like he's in like some Kenosha area up the lake from Chicago. Which
he went to the Dells.
Well, you know what I mean. I mean that feels like that when you live in Chicago. When you go to the country, that's sort of the way you go. Right. You don't go down to Springfield or something. There's nothing down there. You go up the lake one way or another.
Yeah, they ignore the fact that you have to actually get on a ferry to get to
all that stuff. I mean, they don't. There's no road. That's not the place he is. He's in this other made up.
He's not in Mackinac, Island. He's not.
Right. That's just where they
that's where they shot that. Yeah, they recreate. This is the Grand Hotel.
And that little car. Again, it was a city government thing. I mean, just as a behind the scenes thing, to get that little car, to be able to be in the city, to be able to be near the hotel, like it was this big deal. Yep. And they sent all the all the local authorities out there to make sure everything was okay and stuff while they shot these little scenes of the car driving up and being valet parked or whatever.
When we went there, we did a carriage ride sort of thing.
Of course, yeah.
And the person driving it, I think their name was Butchie. And she talked about when they were filming that she was there and Christopher Reeves was being a jerk with his car or something. And, it's too many years ago, I can't remember, but I think she said she punched him.
Oh, really?
And they had to get the car off of the island in the next 24 hours. So luckily they'd gotten the shot.
Right. They got this. Exactly. It was a law. You can have this here for this set amount of time or whatever. Even when he's not really featured, Chris, believe the story is that he insisted on driving it himself.
Yeah.
Which normally you would have a second unit or an insert shot or something. This movie doesn't have any second unit photography that I'm aware of. They were all very accomplished people who worked on big movies of the era, but there was this small group. There was only so many people that could even come. They didn't stay in the hotel because they didn't want the hotel being disrupted. So they stayed in these little cabins or whatever, basically on the, around the bay. So they all kind of had to take bikes to work every day and stuff. Because there are not enough carriages to shuttle all these people over to the hotel. It was all these things that they had to fix. To hear, Chris was really fond of this movie, but there's not, he didn't talk much about it until after his accident. And then he was gone before the real era of these sort of making of tributes and things came in. So we learn a lot about it from Seymour's point of view and from Schwartz's point of view. They're the two that, and the I can't remember the name of the producer, but he was cynical about it as well, and the film really won him over ultimately. It's fun to hear him telling stories about how his mind just slowly changed and this became this thing he really, really cared about at some point. But yeah, Chris, there's the story that it was a difficult day. That day with the car was tough, not just because your star was, trying to quote, do his own stunts or whatever. Right. All he does is drive up in the car.
Yeah.
But you know, it's movies. If we've all three of us have been, Joel more than the other two of us, but we've all been on movie sets and stuff. And sometimes it's the whatever thing that just is the thing that day, and nothing really works, and you don't know why. There's not a real reason for it. And this car with the cops, all of them on the island out monitoring its usage and all this, and just the pressure of we got to get this car stuff done. Just became this self-fulfilling prophecy of this terrible day shooting this movie. And it's one of the first days they did on the film was the arrival. Because let's get this out of the way, get the car out of here, and then everybody will calm down, which is basically what happened. But a lot of nervous energy. It's fun to hear. I'm not sure if I believe that she punched the star of the movie in the face, but it's fun to hear that there's someone there who remembers this, and that's the big story she tells on every carriage ride. Like that is enchanting to me. So I dig that very much. Cool. So why not hit him, make out with him, you know, whatever, do whatever you want your story.
I hooked up with Christopher Reeve.
Lay it on me, eccentric local. You know, that's what I'm here for. I want to hear about Somewhere in Time.
So Richard checks into this hotel intending to only stay the night. And he's, you know, he gets a room. He's looking out at the view. The view is beautiful. He's just like, wow, this is great. All right, I'm gonna go get some food. Great, but problem is, dining room hasn't opened yet.
That's true.
Yep.
What are you gonna do?
He's got to kill some
meet
time.
somebody in here that's kind of important, doesn't he?
This is when he first gets there, he meets
Arthur.
The who's bellhop essentially.
Arthur.
Yep, but Arthur has been at the Grand Hotel since his father was the desk clerk and Arthur was a little boy and he essentially grew up at the Grand Hotel and
Arthur has this little moment where Chris, you know, where Richard says that line to him, "See you around, Arthur," and it's a nice actor moment from Chris because Reeve could really play that, you know, a million ways it could be wrong. The only real way to do it right is to just do it, like it's the off the cuff thing that it is. You know what I'm saying? And that's how he does it. And thank God for that, because I really, like I say, in a lesser movie with an actor that whose instincts aren't as attuned, you really might get a
highlight on that.
But
see you around.
A William Shatner sort of let's stop the whole show for this key line, because anyone who has knowledge of the script understands it's kind of a big deal, but it has to not be for it to play, and Reeve gets that, thank God.
It has to be Arthur's reaction to it.
Correct.
He's just like, have we met before?
Which is an absurd thought. Yeah, that is absurd. Of course, he's never been here before, so why would he? You know,
didn't even know this place was here.
Yep.
Yeah. So then he's got to kill some time, right? So he goes to the Hall of Records or Hall of History or
they have a little museum, little museum in the hotel,
a little basement museum that shows the history of the hotel.
What's that? That photograph.
Oh my goodness!
That's just, I'm entranced.
He's entranced. He's looking at things.
Who is this woman? Who is that bald woman?
He cannot stop. He cannot stop looking.
That is not acceptable.
I'm sorry.
I didn't do that.
No, he didn't do that.
I have the real James anymore. I got this on Mackinac Island at the Grand Hotel.
Joel, when he least expects it's going to pay for that.
That is the painting that I gaze at longingly.
The way this photo, okay, just as a filmmaking moment, this is the opposite of what I was just talking about. Like the see around Arthur's was one thing, and there's only one way to do it. This thing where he sees this, and we see it before he sees it, which is I just recommend you watch this sequence as a way to create visual interest. Everything about it is perfect. I really, really am in awe of it every time I see it. It's maybe at first it is what it is, the mean to an end. But when you become a lover of this film, when the photo appears for the first time, it's just it's second to none as far as other sequences in the film, which there are several memorable ones.
And as he goes to it, going through that shaft of light, And the way that's edited, seeing his perspective, and you can see that there's a light shaft there.
Yep.
And then cutting to his point of view. It's just perfectly edited as well as shot.
And just conceived, like really, that's the brilliance of this. They pull it off, which is great. But just to have conceived it this way, this incredibly romantic, romantic, yes, but romantic and sort of the what we use when we talk about art. It's this big thing. It's hard to explain. It's this epic moment. That's this very intimate thing between this guy and a old photograph hanging on a wall. But it's that picture. Hold it up again, Rob, where we won't be distracted by my horrible face. I love that you actually have that.
It's by
and
my
look at that. Look at the
popcorn
photo
machine hanging on the wall.
Jane Seymour talks about having that taken and after the film, or the ungodly pressure on her to show up and be the Mona Lisa that day, basically. And look at her. She's that look on her face.
She's stunning. Yeah, it is a look of someone who has absolutely fallen in love. It is
really great and super important.
And is looking right at the camera so that the eyes follow you wherever.
When to skip ahead, when they take that, we get to see them take that photograph, and you see all the emotion behind it before you even see that scene. But when you see that scene, it drives it home. She just catches Richard's eye, and the look changes.
It's really, really awesome. And it's, one of my favorite time travel movies which is one of everybody's favorites, The Terminator, which also has a photo in it that is used in very much the same way, which is also basically a romantic time travel film, which would make a decent double feature with this. Maybe. Tonally, it'd be a little different.
Yeah.
But it's funny that movie really takes its cues from somewhere in time to a large degree, when you not in any way that you would ever think, but in all the ways that matter and that make it what it is in the end. I always think that's kind of funny. And the photograph to me is the thing where it almost feels like that can't be a coincidence. You know what I mean? The story of this photo in the different periods, where it ends up, what the meaning behind the expression on her face really is when we find out what it is, we'll get to that. But he becomes obsessed with this photo, Richard. Yeah. He just
he
has to find out who she is. He wants to know if maybe she's still around.
As he first sees it, he feels like she's looking at him like she loves him. And of course she is.
It turns out she is. Yeah. But it's really, really cool. And he goes on one of those really cool, and I wish they still had more of these. They do, but it's not the same. But he goes on one of these cool library investigations, and nothing makes me happier in a movie than a good old library investigation.
Yeah. He just I love he goes up to the librarian woman. He's like, "Do you have any magazines or anything that talk about theater or anything here?" And she's like, "Well, yes, but they're all the way in the back." And I'm just about. And he's like, and he just flashes that Christopher Reeve smile. He's like, "Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate you getting those for me." And he's just, and she even is like, "I am powerless against the handsomeness of this man." Because my goodness gracious, he is so unbelievably
It plays exactly
gorgeous.
Like that. Yeah. It's not just his handsomeness, though. It's this. There's this
the energy
you get where he's gonna get this, and it's her sort of resignation that then I guess I'm gonna do it, and it's awesome. And I love his little searching back through time. You know what I mean? One of the sad things, I think, I don't want to fly all over the place with Terminator and whatever, but one of the sad things that was in the movie and that was a big part of the book in The Shining was this that I loved was this history book that he kind of finds and becomes obsessed with. And this sequence reminds me of the way I feel about that, how we learn through these visual cues and these little blips of headlines and things. And then we learn even more by him telling the story of what he discovered later. It's just it's done very economically. And it's not a mystery where we're like, we have to find out who killed so-and-so.
Right.
But it does have that mysterious, I don't know. I like watching research on TV. That's really weird, but I
yeah, and he so yes, and part of this obsession, he's visiting the he spends, if he's not in a library looking up things, if he's not reading something about this woman who we come to find out her name is Elise McKenna, if he's not learning about her, he is staring at her. And he is just living for that this photograph that is hanging in the museum.
No, this isn't totally a deep dive here, so we don't want to.
Yep.
We keep going at this pace. It's gonna be the whole show.
But so he
but there's another bit of research that he has to do that's key that we have to talk about.
So he's just like So he remembers.
I love this scene, Rob. Yep, you feel the same way. This guy that he goes and talks to.
Yep. So he goes to the college. He goes to the college that was just up the road, which is where he went to school, and where that opening scene takes place. And he remembers this. I can't remember if it was. I think it was a philosophy teacher.
He goes to and sees Elise's old assistant, or
that's
or whatever. And this was her favorite book, and he's like, "Oh, I had this guy as a teacher," and the author, the last name's Finney, which is a nod to Jack Finney, who wrote a time travel book.
And this time and again. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I wish somebody make that into a proper movie.
Yeah, that'd be
in a way. Time and again, particularly by this film, but by others too, has been ripped off so much that it would feel a little rote. I think if you saw it just adapted straight. Yeah, but that's a really fun. Any fans of time travel fiction or romantic fiction, Time and Again is a must read. It's the. Well, I guess Wells, but to me, it's the time travel book. It really is special.
It's really lovely.
And this guy's named after him for a reason, because his method of traveling back in time is the one that's laid out very, very carefully in Time and Again. And because it's not exactly the same, but it's this very similar hypnosis type of method that Reeve ends up using to travel back in time.
And so Richard Matheson gives it a little nod because he wrote the book and the screenplay, and acknowledges that's where it's coming from, which I think is pretty cool.
It's very cool.
But let's talk about.
I'm glad you brought up Matheson, because we haven't mentioned his name yet.
Yeah,
he's as important to the success of Somewhere in Time as anybody, having written the story in the first place.
So let's talk about this method. The method of time travel is essentially,
Rob, by that metric, the Hollywood really shouldn't have been so cynical. I mean, how many awesome Richard Matheson stories have been adapted into incredibly memorable things, right?
Yeah.
All of them, essentially.
Yep.
It's a little weird. Yeah.
It's just that it's not a horror or science fiction movie in terms of how they think of it. This is really a romance.
Right.
It's a little staid
romance. I mean, romance films were.
This guy, Professor Finney, his story, and we always talk about the power of the guy telling the story. His story is compelling. It really
gets a great moment. That actor,
and he does it really, really well. It's fantastic. But because he's I don't want to call him a cynic, but he's a professor. He comes at this at a very pragmatic way, even when he's telling this fantastical story. But it makes Richard believe he can really pull this off. And Joel, I'll let you get back to where you're at.
The methodology behind this is essentially you almost meditate or hypnotize yourself into believing that you exist in this previous time period. And so therefore your whole metaphysical existence will indeed go with your mind and put you in that time period. It's essentially you're willing yourself back in time. And if you believe hard enough, if you will yourself hard enough, you can do it.
What Finney describes is this moment where he felt he saw it, but that it was this fleeting thing, and that his conscious mind pushed back against it, and then he was back where he belonged. So he's
in order to do it,
for a moment he really believed he was looking at this street in this other time. Reeve takes all the tech,
it,
the alarm clock, the TV, shoves it in the closet.
Yep. Anything that could possibly be, thought of as modern day.
Finds an old vintage suit, a little too vintage as it turns out, but
old money.
One roughly from the era, gets all dressed up in it.
Gets all this old money.
Lies on his back and just with all his heart. And it takes a lot of effort and a long time.
And actually
to envision himself back in this
time. He records himself. He records himself going, you exist in 1912. You are there to see Elise McKenna. Like he's recording this and then he's playing this tape recorder next to him. And I was like, that I love that so much. I get rid of all the tech, except that there's this piece of tech that I'm completely relying on.
Right.
To help me with this.
But if you know about like meditation and hypnosis, the sound of that, the voice instructing you,
the
really
drone,
that's an important element of that. So
so
it is a modern technique, but
and he's frustrated, and he ends up going to Arthur in the middle of the night, going, "There's got to be, hey, is there something, is there more stuff? Is there more stuff from that era?" And he's like, "Well, yeah." Arthur's like, "Yeah, it's in the attic," and the key piece that Richard needs, it's this great little time paradox moment, but Richard goes through is going through all of this old stuff in this attic and finds an old guest book and flips through, finds the 1912 guest book, finds that date, finds that time, and lo and behold, who has signed in on this thing? It's him. So it is he by seeing that he can do it, he knows that he can do it, and so therefore he goes back and he does it.
Super cool.
And he knows what time he knows check in, and he knows what room he's gonna get.
Yep.
It's very, very cool.
It's so much fun. And so he goes.
Like I say, now that we've gotten here and that this is going to work, we have to step this up a little bit and get through the relationship bits a little quicker.
Yep. So he gets there. We get this great, we get these great scenes of him.
He's not like other people have come into his room, right? He's in someone else's room.
He's in someone else's room because he's not in the room that he checks into.
Do the whole hiding out and everything, and then sneaks out of the room where this couple is having this argument.
Yep. And Christopher Reeve. I mean, the whole movie is on Christopher Reeve's amply huge shoulders. Right. And he absolutely
to some degree, and I would say Seymour's as well. She has to be this. She has to somehow be a person eventually. The movie wouldn't work if she didn't become one. And yet, the whole film up until this point, and really the whole first half of this, second act in the past is her being just overtly romanticized. It takes a sort of special actor to understand that you're that, which I don't think at that point she'd have any problem pulling that off. Yep. The trickier part is to bring her down to earth and make her this believable person in a shorter amount of time that we can put with this other guy and believe them as like a real thing. And that to me is the magic of her performance. All
right, let me hustle up so we can get there. So he comes down, we get these great scenes of him coming down. The hotel is bustling with people, and he sees all the old timey vacuum cleaner and everything else, and even this little boy,
room he needs to be
he
in,
knows what room he's
got taken.
Wait,
it's not taken. It's one of those.
And
he hasn't checked in yet.
He hasn't checked in yet, but he does meet Arthur. He does meet Arthur, the little boy. So we get, so we do get this moment where, where he connects with this little boy named Arthur, and he puts it together. Like, oh yeah, you must be Arthur, who I meet later on.
But
he's going around. He's like
looking for Elise.
He's like, where's Elise McKenna? I got to find Elise McKenna.
Very single-minded.
And he goes by the theater where Elise McKenna is performing, and they're like, oh, if she's anywhere, she's down by the lake, because that's where she always hangs out. So he goes there, and the shot where he is looking and the door closes and we see the reflect. Yeah, the shade gets pulled down, and when the shade gets pulled down, we can see then the reflection. Yep. And off in the distance, looking out at the lake, there she is, Elise McKenna.
It's one of a half dozen breathtaking shots in the film. It really is amazing.
And so a very
and then
think
one
about
of
that.
the others
She gets-
is this very next one as he approaches her and the way it's backlit naturally and stuff, the way she appears to him. And what does she say to him, Rob, when he walks up to her?
Is it you?
Is it you?
She gets 2 fantastic introductions to the film. The first is just her photograph,
Right.
and the second one is this. I mean, how many characters get to get introduced in a film twice?
It didn't take
and so memorably.
Jane wasn't a big star or anything. I don't think she was ever really a big star. She was always kind of a secondary star, but she was a very popular actor around this time.
Yeah.
And she didn't take a lot of arm twisting to get her to do this part. She as much as anybody, more so than even Reeve, jumped into it really wanting it to be a great thing.
Yeah.
Just as a side thing, the film, of course, the film is often talked about for its score being brilliant, which it is. The great John Barry, it's a fantastic John Barry score, but I think a lot of rubes out there kind of associate him with the classical piece of music that really is the theme to the film, which isn't by him at all. Who wrote that? I can't remember.
It's Rachmaninoff.
Rachmaninoff.
Yeah.
That music that Joel was playing, he can play it for you here in a second if you want to hear a little blip of it. This is sort of her theme. It's accompanied by her all the time. And it's not a John Barry thing. But a fun story about John Barry real quick, so I can get in a last behind the scenes story before it becomes too late. They were looking for a composer, and first of all, they wanted to find somebody who'd be really, really good at this sort of subtle romantic music. And one that wouldn't mind that the star of the thing really was going to be Rachmaninoff and not them. And they didn't have any money. They were given no money to hire anybody. And she suggested John Barry. And Schwartz said, yes, of course, but I'm not even going to ask him because it would be an insult for me to go and say, please do our movie for $20 or whatever. She goes, oh, well, I know him. Let me ask him. And she did. She just said, I'm doing this movie right now with these Americans and this French guy, and I really think it's special, and I think you would be perfect for it. They were pals, and I didn't think she had to schmooze them too much because they were pals. And Barry, if you ever listen to him talk about how he chooses projects, he never knows quite why he's deciding to do something or turning something down. It's a really fascinating thing about him that he just doesn't. Sometimes he gets a feel for something and does it, and it turns into magic. But more often than not, he turns down things that become big hits. He accepts stuff as a result of him turning that down that ends up being stupid. Like he never really quite knows what he's doing. And here's somebody, a friend that he trusts, saying, "I believe in this thing, and I think you'd be great at it." And he's like, "I'll do it."
Yeah.
Okay.
And she's like, "Well," and she just calls back, and she says, have the producers call him. He said he'd do it. And they're like, well, we can only offer it. He's like, he said he'd do it. He'll do it.
Yep.
Just send him the paper and the script and let's get him going. And worked out. Worked out really, really good in this case.
His theme, the Somewhere in Time theme, is also quite lovely with Roger Williams on piano. That's also a pretty iconic theme.
This Rachmaninoff part, we kind of skipped over, but when Richard goes to see where Elise lived at the end of her life, he sees the Grand Hotel. She has this music box. It's the Grand Hotel.
And
when you open it up, that's playing the Rachmaninoff piece, and he's like, "This is my most favorite piece of music in the world." It's what a coincidence.
Yep.
Like all of these things. Like, why do you have her watch? It disappeared the night she died.
Yep.
Without going into every detail from here on out, because we've made it. And
we're too used to doing giant deep dives. We have another movie to talk about, we watch them legitimately fall in love. Christopher Plummer plays her manager, who is
Is it you line is this romantic, we've made it sort of thing, but they're this hurdles they have to get over to fall in love. Yep. She's very standoffish. Like you said, Christopher Plummer is her manager / handler / doesn't let her get near anybody sort of guy. He considers his primary function to protect her virginity. It's fun. We get to see her in action on stage, and it's not after it's very clever switch that after all these super romanticized stuff, she's not in some heavy melodrama. She's in this light chamber comedy where she's this really funny, charming, goofy person, which is just not the person that we've met. So you really get to see how actorly the character is, which I think is groovy. But
I do want
he wins her over, just like he won over that librarian.
Yeah, he wins her over. And going back to what you said real quick about Jane Seymour creating this whole character, creating this believable, likable person. She is standoffish, but she's not mean. She's standoffish because she's been told you're going to meet someone who's going to absolutely change your life, change everything. And it's going to be tragic. And she sees this, really incredibly handsome guy, and she's just like, she's like, oh, okay. So she's standoffish because she also feels that connection. And you get that whole sense from her, just from moment go, where she says, are you the one, or whatever the specific line is.
She's scared of this thing.
She immediately feels that connection that he clearly feels it, but he doesn't have this. And Christopher Plummer is hell-bent on stopping them getting together. They are able to run off and spend the day together, essentially falling in love in this beautiful 19.
They come to grips with what he really is late in the film, which is really cool. But he's up until that point, he's such what you would expect this part to be. He's this controlling, he's
a Svengali. He really he's had to do this with several men before. He's never met someone quite like Richard, but he's very, very good at keeping these guys away and working every function that society has to offer to do it. And there's this point where it's not working, and he sort of breaks down and just levels with Richard and says, she could be special, and what you can only be an impediment to that. Even if you're not an impediment somehow to her happiness, you can only hurt her from a career standpoint. And and Reeve has this great moment too, where I misjudged you. I thought you were just this. You love her, and Plummer's fantastic in this scene.
Let's nobody does that moment up a little bit though, because right before that is when she performs on the stage and goes off script, and that's a great moment for her.
I agree.
And another moment where you just see them connecting. Right at that curtain call, then for intermission, they're taking that photograph, and she's sitting there they're trying to get the photograph,
because they very much fall in love during montage, right? They go on a boat ride, they really do all this stuff. It's we don't see the hard part of them. It's so magical that you don't need to, but to be fair, the film sort of takes that off, the let's get to know each other stuff. You get a little bit of it, especially before they start falling in love, because they have the dinner conversation and everything. But the film's very clever in the way it culminates with that theater scene and follows it up immediately with this sort of backstage, literally and figuratively scene with Plummer's character. And unfortunately, that these two gentlemen have an understanding of each other, and they have her best interest at heart, clearly, both of them. But Plummer's not letting up, and his final gambit. Rob, you know the movie better than me. You probably explain it, but what happens where we think our lovers have truly been torn apart before that amazing reunion scene?
Right. So Plummer's character lures Christopher Reeves out there. They have that conversation. I think it's his one last chance to try and just get rid of him friendly. In a friendly way, like, do you want some money to go away? What is it, or whatever? And Christopher Reeves like, no, I love her. We're going to be together.
And we're gonna be married, and I don't want to stand in the way of her career. She'll still be an actor. Everything's gonna be great. What's your problem, dude?
Because he has to control everything.
Because
it's not even that matter of control, although that's certainly a factor. He doesn't believe him.
He doesn't believe him.
Stumbles into this time period and says, "Oh, my wife can still be an actor." Like, we have to understand some things about the era that's
married women.
It's not believable, really, from his standpoint. So he doesn't take him at his word after that.
Plummer's hired some henchmen to
got some toughs.
Take Reeves out, tie him
beat
up.
him down a little bit and lock him up so that he stands her up before she has to leave town.
Yep. And he wakes up with a horse in his face.
That's right. That's right.
And that's not a euphemism.
And he thinks she doesn't. I mean, he's ready to cross the country to find her.
Yep.
But he's looking around the hotel. He's finding the empty theater. He finds all this stuff. It's this super tragic, sad moment. We think it's the saddest thing we're going to see, probably, which is very clever because this isn't that sad if you really think about it. But the work makes you feel so distraught over it. Which
they had these plans. Everything was going to be great, and
he's
left.
sitting in this shot too. I can't.
I know. He's up top. Just
on
came
this
out of the
long
hotel.
staircase down to the large yard behind the hotel.
Yep. And I don't know what kind of lens they're using, but they've got him in great focus.
And
then she's
it's classic
on the other half of the
diopter,
scene.
But she's a million miles away
out there, and you can see her and you recognize her shape, even though she's tiny.
Yeah.
You recognize her. You know that's her.
She's also sad. She's walking, her head hung low, walking up, and then he turns.
She starts screaming and running towards him, and he hears her and he sees her, and they run down this large staircase.
We don't hear her.
Was so
we
fun
just
to
see
walk
her
on.
start, right?
We do hear a Richard. We do hear we do hear a big Richard.
Well,
and
it's stunning. It's a stunning visual moment. It's really really amazing.
And so so they get together, and
it wasn't something they could storyboard or something he could have dreamed up when he watched the novel. You had to be there at the place, looking and going, and having that spark of inspiration that made you go, "This is how I'm going to do this."
And so they consummate their love. They are together. We know that they are, and so then she says,
they know it. They know that they were always meant for each other in this moment. This is high romanticism of the, because the lovemaking fairly chaste, but this we know it now. Like it's okay.
This is essentially their wedding. This is where they know that they are together for the rest of their life. They have no intention of ever being apart.
Go. She stayed.
She stayed.
And look, he's looking for me. It's this
and
perfection thing.
So
romantic perfection.
So then they're just having some food and and blissing out in their little nest. And she's like, well, one of the first things we do are going to get you a new suit, because that suit
they've been commenting throughout how awful his suit is.
His suit. It's 10 years old at least.
10 years out of date, which at that time in fashion is really
to which he is like, what is wrong with my suit? I think my suit is great. Look, it's got all these pockets. You can keep everything. And hey, look, it's even got these great little coin pockets. And he got a coin.
And he pulls out a penny. And we do a zoom in on the penny, I believe.
Yep, the zoom in on the penny says.
And the penny, what does the penny say on it? 1979.
And
here's another visual moment that will slow this down for just a little bit.
Oh yeah, this is
just this simple filming technique, but something about it.
And
he looks up at her and connects with her eyes with just utter fear on his face. You can tell he's seen this thing, and we've seen it too. So we're not sure what's going on, but we can feel it. That penny's. It ruined everything, right?
Yep. Everything. And he starts to fade back and pull. Yeah, the penny drops. He starts pulling
see it sort
back
of from his point of view, and she's screaming his name, calling his name, but she keeps getting further and further and further away, more faded, more she's not even there. And it's all an old-fashioned optical, but it's an astounding moment. And he wakes up back in 1979 in his room.
Can't get back.
And he has to get back. He has to get back.
Can't. And
in the end, we find out it's because he's holding that penny in his hand. It drops out of his hand after he's been trying for hours to get back.
Right.
His hand
Hours,
drop
days,
and the penny
weeks.
falls out.
We're not really sure how much time passes here. We know the strength of his resolve, though, and I always believed that this went on for a long, long time. That he didn't. I like to believe that he didn't really, because he dies in this sequence. He didn't really kill himself so much as he
he just kept trying until he
He
had
just
nothing left.
He just had no
prioritized,
way
yeah.
to,
He prioritized his will
Yep.
to try to do this, took priority over everything, including food, water, rest, anything.
And when Arthur and the hotel manager or whatever break in and they see him, he's sitting in front of the window. He's got the same view that the old lady had on her last night.
Yep.
Looking out, and it's just
and then
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and we see this, and we have this moment where suddenly he's laying on the bed, and all of a sudden we get an overhead shot and see him laying there getting CPR performed on him. So and then that fades up and into a bright light, and waiting in this light is
once the penny has fallen out of his hand. It's more than that. They're both gone now.
Yeah.
It's this vision of the person from your past welcoming you to heaven, essentially, and they embrace, and the Rachmaninoff kicks up, and the end.
And that, and it's so. Yeah, it is this beautiful.
We blew through the ending because we're out of time to talk about this movie, but that ending is agonizing. It doesn't take too long on screen, but it takes just long enough to make you feel helpless and like it just can't happen. Like it really, his attempts to get back to her go on for a while. Yeah. And we experience that impatience and that frustration and that devastation that it's not working. Whatever worked before isn't working. It's weird. So, I mean,
it's kind of a tragedy ending because they don't get to live their life together, but we do get to see them get together, where we know they'll spend, presumably, if you believe in that, they will be spending eternity together.
Well, it's this romantic thing where they experience this true love for this however much time. The tragedy is crucial to its success. Yeah. The fact that this film, because I'm with you, I'm not sure it's an unhappy ending. I think it left romantics fairly exhilarated as they're met again in heaven and embraced or whatever. I think whether you believe that or not, if you believe in the true love part of the story, that gets you in the heart basically at the end.
Which of course we've seen that, and that has been, something that we've always seen, that true love, no matter what, true love will exist beyond life.
But the analysis of it, when you look back on it, the tragedy is the thing that
they never got
them
to live.
Being ripped apart is the thing that makes the thing work. Without that, we saw what we thought was some old-fashioned movie version of that just moments ago. Yeah, and we were all, they found each other, and then to really feel it, the movie, it's a bait and switch. The movie pulls on you. That Matheson does something similar. That's why it works so great. Yep, and it's his twist ending basically, and it just works like gangbusters.
Yeah. Because I mean, if you've been paying attention, you're thinking about, that he doesn't get back to her because she comes and says, "Come back to me."
No, we know. We know as soon as we see the penny. He knows, I think, too, somewhere deep down. But that's the whole thing. That's why that moment is just.
He's not going to get back to her. He can't live, because how does he go on and marry somebody else 5 years from now and keep writing plays? I mean, this was his true love. Right. This is the way it has to end, and they still give you a happy ending with them both dead somehow. And, it works.
Yeah, it does. It does work.
All right. Happy at the end. You're like, oh, they're together. Yay.
Yep. So if Somewhere in Time is a story of time travel working great, actually. And,
just real quick as a postmortem on Somewhere in Time.
Okay.
Sorry, I know you're trying to move on because I keep telling you have to. It's mean of me to stop you. I was going to say that one thing about the producer. That producer. Right. And the studio and everybody, they tested this film. It tested off the charts positive. Everyone who came across it, all these same people who didn't believe a lick in the thing before they started shooting, when it was in its final form, all loved it so much that they changed all their plans for it. They stopped treating it like a little movie. They put it out in a major release. They did a lot of commercial advertising for it. The film was considered a big disappointment at the time because of those pressures that they put on it once they realized it was really good. He says, looking back, the film outperformed in their hearts and minds before it underperformed at the box office. He said, we got ahead of ourselves with it. We should have rolled it out slowly. We should have put it out at festivals. We should have let word of mouth build about it. That's the kind of movie that it was. That's ended up being what happened to it once it left theaters.
Yep.
But it really underperformed in theaters because they believed in it so much by the time it was finished. It's just the tragedy of Somewhere in Time that I think is worth talking about.
Yeah, it's one of those movies where if it's put in front of you, you're going to love it, but you have to want to sit down and watch it.
And it's a tough sell, especially in this post-Star Wars world. They sold it hard, but it's Superman a tough sell. It's like it took time to find the people that really, really loved it. And there's people that love it. There are people that still meet annually at that hotel and celebrate this film. They're
and
granted,
use it to have another kid.
It's a diminishing group of people, but that's the kind of fandom that the thing inspired, just this utter devotion.
It's very true. And every shop on that island has stuff
from
related to it.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
It drives a lot of tourism to Mackinac Island.
Is that where you got your photo there?
That's where I got my photo.
That's so you to have that photo. That is one of the coolest. I got all sorts
of postcards and everything I could find.
It's one of the coolest pieces of movie memorabilia I've ever seen. I'm saying that unironically. And when I saw you hold that up, I'm like, oh my God, of course you have that. And it makes me think, well, I should get that too. Although my place is really no place for a thing like that.
Before I had my theater room, it hung in our bathroom. But now it's right by my popcorn machine. It's where
it's not nearly as good as my piece of memorabilia.
Oh my God.
But
that is unique.
It's something. All right. So if Somewhere in Time is an example of time travel working great, and then ultimately though it doesn't work out at the end because the time travel pulls our lovers apart and they don't get to spend their life together.
It works. They had their moment, and
sure, but they didn't get
1,000 suns.
Correct, but the tragedy of it is that they don't get to spend
for all of any metaphysical eternity that you believe in.
Sure, but for the sake of my transition here that I worked out, I'm going to say that it didn't quite work out in the sense that they didn't get to spend the rest of their life together. Time After Time is an example of time travel, again working, but it does not work out where the people it's not exactly working out solid. We end up having people moving forward in time, and frankly a good number of people dying, and
We've spoken about Nicholas Meyer on the show before when we talked about the 7% solution. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, most famously probably for him. The film he did in between those two projects was this one, Time After Time. And this was his directorial debut. And this was his it's sort of similar to what Jeannot was going through. He wasn't owed any favors, but he wrote a modest enough thing. And because that novel, 7% Solution, was a huge, huge top bestseller at the end of the 70s. People don't fully appreciate that. A lot of people had written Sherlock Holmes stories, but this guy came along and wrote what is considered and is still considered all these years later, 40 years, the greatest non-Arthur Conan Doyle Sherlock Holmes story ever. And that just put him on the map as this super talented guy you had to get. And he wrote this very clever story. It's structured like H.G. Wells's Time Machine, but Wells is the main character in it, played by Malcolm McDowell. And Wells actually builds this time machine, and he's got it in his basement, and he shows his whatever, I don't know what you call them, his
buddies, his bros,
his fellow club members or whatever, these other high society guys.
His hashtag squad.
Yeah, including this physician played by David Warner, turns out to be Jack the Ripper. Spoiler alert. Doesn't take long to get this premise out of the way in this film. Unlike Somewhere in Time, where there's this long buildup. This is rabbit-tat-tat.
We find out right away because we start with Jack the Ripper claiming a victim, and when he claims a victim, he plays this little tune on his pocket watch.
Yeah.
And
I'd actually like to go back further than that. This film opens with a Warner Brothers shield. Mm-hmm. And movies weren't doing that.
No, they had that. Then. Me and Nick disagree on this, but this is worth mentioning. They had the great red double zoom Saul Bass logo at the front of everything, and they continued to for a few years.
Yes, they did.
Nick's great line about that is, that looks like something you should stamp on the side of a piece of office furniture.
But it is perfect for this film to open like this with that sky. Opens in Victorian England. It has this sense.
It opens on the most famous shot on the most famous street of the most famous Hollywood backlot of Victorian England. He doesn't pull any punches. He's like, I could have been like, oh, this is an original. We've seen this 100,000 times. But what I realized was that my movie, and I've talked about it time and time again, Keith Gordon, all this list of these people. Nicholas Meyer, just go on YouTube, any of his symposiums, anytime he shows up on something, anytime he does a commentary for one of his films, which he does for this film, he is the most intriguing guy from a storytelling standpoint to listen to talk about the filmmaking and writing experience, man. He's got this brief interview that we quoted earlier in the year when I was talking about Joel actually brought it up, volunteers on the John Candy episode. And he's got this it's one of the greatest quotes in Hollywood history, as far as I'm concerned. He said, 2 elephants says Thailand. 1 elephant says you can't afford 2 elephants. That's Nick in a nutshell. That quote perfectly personifies his sort of wisdom and his sort of snarkiness and his kind of, And he's like, this is the kind of movie that would start on this street with this door, and he does, and it's awesome.
And the score for this film also, I love the score.
Who does the score for this? Goldsmith?
This is Miklos Rosa, a 4-time Oscar winner.
Really?
Yeah.
Old-timey Oscar winner, huh?
Yeah, old-timey, but that's what this film needs, particularly the way it opens here.
For sure.
Then it carries into the modern times, and it still has that feel because our main characters from then, and the design of the whole film, even down to the time machine, you could see it being made by George Pal in 1960 when he made the Time Machine film. It has that feel. It has this classic Hollywood feel. And I love it. I love Victorian England. I love things set back then. I love Sherlock Holmes.
Me too. And this film does carry Victorian England with it everywhere it goes, even though it mostly takes place in modern 1979.
Yep.
Anyway, Wells messed up. He did unwittingly, but he showed his time machine, which really is the time machine out of all those old photos.
Yeah.
Apparently, it was a really problematic, cheaply made prop, but in its defense, it looks brilliant every time it's on screen. It looks perfect. It's this gold, weird, like really a Victorian idea of what a spaceship would look like. And
Meyer said it was he was inspired by his love of the Nautilus from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. He wanted the design to sort of be similar to that, and
they delivered
totally
that.
See it.
It's really awesome. Yeah. Unfortunately, Wells has shown it to these old guys who are like, "Bravo, Wells! Yes, that is amazing."
I can't. Surely it doesn't work, but
they have this mix of what you would think: this incredulity and this, whatever.
You truly are a visionary of the future.
But his super tall doctor friend is like, he's thinking like something else and not saying anything. Well, it turns out he's Jack the Ripper. He steals the time machine. He takes it forward in time to 1979. A really, really good time for Jack the Ripper to show up in terms of, he shows up in modern San Francisco, right? Frisco? Yes.
Yep.
in 1979, and
he has
then
no
the time
problem
machine
adapting.
returns
He's
home
let
to him, and
loose on the
Wells
modern
has-
era.
time has to chase after time into the future. Wells had these other plans, but now he's got to stop this guy. He finds out in a convoluted way that's not important who he is and what's happened. But one of the magical scenes is when Wells shows up in the H.G. Wells exhibit at a museum in his own time machine, where it's been on display for all these years.
They found it. They found
He
it in
forgets his
own place.
glasses back in
Yes.
England, so he goes to his desk where they've recreated his laboratory, and they happen to be sitting right there for him. That's one of those wonderful time travel things.
That always makes me like a sister joke of that is in Star Trek 4, which Myers co-wrote.
Yes.
Kirk's gonna pawn his glasses, and they say,
so they can have some money to spend again in modern San Francisco. It's no coincidence that that's all the same.
Yep.
Nick Meyer, real quick, they asked it. Wrath of Khan's the best Star Trek movie. We all agree on that.
Yes.
He disowned Star Trek, basically said, if you bring Spock back to life, then what was the point of all this? He was really, really upset about that. And so he had nothing to do with the sequel, but they came kind of crawling back to him after a couple of years have gone by, and they're like, how about this one? He's like, no, you guys, I'm sorry, I'm done with that. I did what I wanted to do on Star Trek. And they said, well, here's the story. What if you just, you don't have to direct the movie. Leonard will direct the movie, but what if you just wrote this part,
right,
where the fun part where they go back to modern day San Francisco. Yep. And he did. Meyer wrote that entire section of the film. Harv Bennett took the future and lead up scenes to it, and he took that, and it's chock full of these sort of time travel references and stuff. Yep. The glasses is great. He goes, weren't those a gift from Spock? McCoy says to him, and Shatner's got the great line, and they will be again. That's the beauty of it.
The great thing that Myers does in that film, particularly more, but in this one, he finds the correct balance of putting in little bits of time travel humor.
Yeah.
He doesn't overdo it. In Time After Time, he's not overdoing it. It never feels like it takes you out of the film.
There's never
lots
this
of moments that
there's
a chuckle.
He's an extremely clever writer and can't help himself, but he does, as a writer and as a director, he knows what to keep the focus on. And the focus,
they never do too many fish out of water jokes. They never do, it's
not
never
too many,
and not too many, but just enough that, because it could turn into, it could, and
McDowell, who had just played Caligula, and who had been in, what's the
Clockwork
Kubrick film?
Orange, and
he was this guy who had this screen persona that was, out of this world. And here and this really works because a lot of it is on McDowell to play that wide-eyed wonderment at the future, whilst also being a proper English gentleman who's still very well-mannered and doesn't gawk at or freak out about any of these things. He keeps his composure throughout. He is on a mission after all, but he gets sidetracked from his mission of and it's a great H.G. Wells. Just that's one of the best one-sentence pitches in all Hollywood. H.G. Wells hunts down Jack the Ripper in modern San Francisco. And it's called Time After Time. That's awesome. But he gets sidetracked. He didn't come here looking for his true love, and yet he trips and falls into the chair in front of her desk anyway. And I've told Joel, I have nothing more annoying than watching Tom Cruise and Penelope Cruz pretend to fall in love with each other in Vanilla Sky when they're actually falling in love with each other. That literally makes me throw up in my mouth.
Right. But it works here.
And yet here, you had these two were married. They had a pair of kids together. You literally are watching Malcolm McDowell and she had been in that Western that Nicholson
Going
directed.
South.
But and scattered things, but this wasn't a big star. What's her name?
Mary Steenburgen.
Mary Steenburgen.
Her second film,
Yeah. So, and she's both of them say this. There's something. I mean, she obviously Mary Steenburgen. We know what she is now, and how her personality gets grafted on these sorts of characters that she plays and everything. Yeah. But what they both say was that what they were both taken by was Nick Meyer most of all, but Malcolm, because he fell in love with her, and he always tells his kids, if you want to see mom and dad falling in love, just go watch Time After Time. It's all there on screen for you. You can see the whole thing. Nick said he wrote these words, but the way she said them was unlike anyone sort of talked at the time. She had this weird way of making this stuff her own and making it unlike anything else that anyone else did. She's really, really unique person on screen, and she was an absolute steal in this film. And it was one of those things where they kind of had to convince a bunch of people that it should be her and not somebody more glamorous or whatever.
Nick
had to convince himself, right? Because he thought it should be
a blonde.
Modern blonde sort of, fast talking lady that he falls in love with. And what he found was this weird, quirky librarian kind of person. Yep. But he fell in love with her too. Malcolm did. We all do when we watch the film. She's just really, really awesome. And that relationship, Warner's Jack the Ripper is very much a part of this story still. All the way to the end, but that relationship and her guided tour through the future with him is really what takes stage. And in that way, this film is a romance, very much like Somewhere in Time is.
It's their connection, that love, that raises the stakes, that makes you care about Jack the Ripper, makes you care about stopping him.
His mission, and she's suddenly wrapped up in all this dangerous stuff. He's Wells is aware of that throughout, but what's she call him? What's his first name? I can't remember. Herbert, that's right.
Yeah.
Herbert. And then obviously as he is continuing, Jack the Ripper continues his Jack the Ripper-ish ways.
Let's talk about Jack the Ripper quick. Yeah. Like you said, it opens with that point of view shot. You get the watch. This watch will be his
Jack
signature.
the Ripper films open with a point of view shot of a murder.
Whenever he's going to kill somebody, that watch comes out, that music plays. There's a link there with Somewhere in Time with the watch and a theme music that is I hear the music.
Yeah, there it is.
Nice. But Myers had this philosophy with this film. Nobody was going to see a knife go into another person.
Right.
He didn't want to do that sort of thing. But what he did is so much more terrifying. Every time Jack kills, that first point of view shot after that, you hear this ripping sound as you watch the girl's eyes just lose.
Terrible music box music playing, and
a little.
It's almost like I know obviously it's a rip. It's a rip sound. It almost sounds like a zipper. Going though, it
isn't a realistic sound.
9-year-old.
It's a sound cue that tells you what's happening.
Yep.
And it's smart stuff.
Yep. And
for a first-time director, it's a very stylish and very well thought out film visually.
Yep.
More so than I think any of his others. Visually, it's stunning. He knows San Francisco pretty well, and uses all these locations from his imagination, like in very, very creative ways. There's a great foot chase between our two heroes, a great philosophical debate followed by a great foot chase. That foot chase in modern fountain and escalator sort of San Francisco is, it's
really fun. Yeah.
It's really, really cool.
We've got the one of the other kills where he is killing one of the prostitutes, probably about where we are and talking about the film. And you just get a splash of blood with that watch sound, like a tear down his eye. It just it sells David Warner as just this embodiment of this psychopath.
The censors can't object, and yet it's just so much more horrific than actual gratuitous violence.
You brought up the philosophical debate, and that is, that's part of the heart of this film. Is H.G. Wells is a futurist. He believes that mankind is going to solve all of its problems, and going forward in time, he's going to go into this utopia, and that's part of why he has to go stop Jack the Ripper, because Jack the Ripper has been unleashed on what is undoubtedly a utopia.
Yeah.
Right.
So mankind is not going to
Wells is naive enough that he sort of believes in the utopia aspects of the future when he discovers them.
And And
Jack,
yeah,
on the
Jack,
other hand, I can't remember that character's actual name, but
John Leslie Stevenson.
John, as Herbert calls him constantly,
his friends call him.
He can't believe the future he's come to. He feels like has to up his game because this world is small potato. He's small potatoes in this world compared to what he was in the past, where he felt he was the devil on earth. Now he's just to make his mark. He's got to, it's this kind of terrifying thing. And both Warner and McDowell, like I said, McDowell mostly because you just never seen him. We've seen him do everything now. He's a long-time character actor, but nobody had seen him play this sweet, nice, well-meaning, heroic guy. It's such again, the idea that Myers saw him and said, "Oh yeah, that's the guy. That's the guy who should do it," or that he saw, that he was about to cast Kay Lenz or whoever, and then he saw Steenburgen and said, that whatever that is, whatever I was thinking, that's the thing. Like that bit of spontaneity and is fantastic. Yeah. And Warner, he was a huge fan of David Warner. And David Warner is the guy. He's the guy of Myers that carries forward into all his projects. He shows up again and again and again in all his films and other things. Because they're just, I don't know that they're pals really. I think it's like his good luck charm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Warner kept coming up to him and going, keep it short, short little lines, keep the cut short so I don't have to learn too much. All right, have a good day. And then he would kind of go away. And, Myers said he's always got exasperated and off his balance over these things that Warner would say to him. And finally at the end, he got the balls enough to say, hey man, you played Hamlet and stuff. What is this with you don't want to memorize a bunch of lines stuff? That's ridiculous. And he's like, well, you never know. I might forget them.
It's a process.
He's off.
Well, that's a process, isn't it?
That's the process, right?
Yeah.
So funny. David Warner's a character, I love him.
Yeah.
And in this, he's playing this ominous villain. He brings a little quirk to him, but he keeps it. I think he realizes that too much character, too much Ripper doesn't work. So he plays this really low
he keeps it. Yeah,
his calm
feel like there's
and
a lid on him.
And these moments of terror are.
But he plays it so that lid could blow off at some point.
Right.
He does that really well.
And ultimately, the thing standing in the Ripper's way is the fact that H.G. Wells is still here. So he needs to he's going to get in that time machine and he's going to go, I guess even further into the future, or just go somewhere. He's got to go somewhere and where H.G. Wells can't get to him. So he needs to make sure that the time machine will not come back to its destination so that H.G. Wells can't continue to chase him. Because he knows H.G. Wells is like a hound dog at that point. He's like, I will track you to the end.
He's an equal and opposite adversary. John recognizes that right away. He tries to kind of talk to him like, let's just go our own way. Look where we are. What do you care about a few people dying here? But
I'm home.
Yep.
He turns on the TV and shows him all the violence. And he says, "I'm home."
Yeah.
It's really,
he even threatens H.G. Wells's new love. He even threatens Amy, and and holds her hostage until that's ultimately how he feels he can get the. She's a banker. She's a
bank teller at the Bank of England in San Francisco.
She does currency exchange.
So she's already taken with all things England. That helps their relationship grow a little faster. Yeah. There's a lovely bonding scene with them in a rotating restaurant that's all done in one shot. Really great 70s one shot scene with the camera. It didn't even move. It's the restaurant doesn't feel like it's moving. You're moving with it. It's outside that's moving. There's mostly that's just cool for cool's sake, but there's also what's moving and what's not. There is thematic richness to that.
Yeah.
When it actually becomes Hitchcock time and it's just sneaking around in the dark, cops showing up, him getting arrested, running through the park, all that stuff at the end of the film. It's all done really, really well. There's one shot of, I can't remember if it's a car pulling up or there's a shot out the window of something. What is that? That's so awesome at the end of that film. To me, it's very, it's not Hitchcock in that it's so genius. It's just going the extra mile to show something with the ultimate amount of visual interest that you can muster in a modest film.
Okay.
Keep an eye out for it when you watch
yeah.
it. It's really, really good. That stuff, watch the, I don't know, maybe you don't watch stuff for this reason like I do, but if you do and you pay attention to that, really watch the setups in that. Watch how the Somewhere in Time is this very old timey, almost fuzzy, hazy, degraded, spherically shot. You couldn't have had that split diopter if he'd have shot that in super widescreen. He couldn't have done it.
Right.
So he used his tech to the best of its ability.
Right.
In this, it's like it's not so old fashioned because it's a widescreen adventure tale, even though it's a very modest one. The Warner Brothers shield on the widescreen frame.
I love that this one's 239 to 1.
It's a gorgeous film in that
185.
degree.
Yeah.
And the depth and the visually, the way that he fills the frame with stuff in the background and in the foreground. Very, very solid filmmaking for a first-time director.
I had both of them on Laserdisc, and Somewhere in Time was pan and scan, and it's not that much different than what I'm watching now.
But Somewhere in Time played great on HBO because it really was
exactly
close enough.
After time, it feels like there's a whole.
It's much better, proper, but it played really, really great because it was shot more intimately. Somewhere in Time on home video didn't look very good. It looked like a kind of gray, hazy mess where you weren't quite seeing everything that was happening. That scene where they get on the two crosswalks, with the chase, that whole thing takes up the full frame of it at one point or another.
Yep.
And on TV, when you cut that in half, it works, but the grandeur of it is gone.
Right.
Because actually, Time After Time had 2 Laserdisc releases. I owned them both. The first one was pan and scan. Then they re-released it in widescreen, and I had to buy it again.
You had to buy it again.
Yeah.
You never should have bought that pan and scan.
I know. Well, it's the only way you could see it at the time.
Y'all, we'll get to that in Ryan's video corner.
If you're gonna buy pan and scan, you might as well buy the VHS. We're not going to do, Ryan.
Right.
Hopefully, we'll get to your questions, but we're out of time for
That's a good point.
All right. So, okay.
But there'll be plenty of video corners in the future for me and
real
Rob
quick
to talk about the wonders of Laserdisc technology.
So while our heroes in Somewhere in Time never got to spend their earthly life together,
I was certain. Can I just say, I was certain these two were doomed from the start. And when the movie tells you they are, I completely believed it. Hook, line, and sinker. Truly, I don't know why. Maybe I don't know why, but to the point that I've seen this several times through the years, and at least a couple more times throughout the years, I believed it again. I believed this movie had this terrible ending where she was killed by Jack the Ripper, where he was ultimately stopped. I don't know why I believed that and continued to believe it even after I saw the movie. I watched this again recently, not for the show, but just sort of a couple months back. And I'm like, oh, yeah. Oh, good. I forgot about that.
Oh, good. It only killed the roommate, killed the buddy.
Which is impactful enough, honestly. But it really is, because she's a sweetheart.
Well, and you get the moment where he believes that she's dead.
And I believed it. I really believed it too, because this film is set up that it really could be that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we do get,
she is set up as a tragic character the first time you meet her.
The Jack the Ripper
says, "I'm not going back to you. I have my own life here."
And he's like, "I can't stay here because that is my home. I have to do all of this stuff that is in the museum here. I can't stay here." And they do. He sends Jack the Ripper soaring through time without the help of a time machine.
That's the resolution to the big fight, the big duke it out at the end. Yep. Which is kind of a neat idea.
So they say their goodbyes, and and he gets in H.G. Wells gets in the time machine. He even starts it up, and it is going, and she is like, "Nope, I gotta come with."
She runs and jumps into his arms. It's very romantic.
And so he stops, and he's like, she's like,
he does the what? Malcolm does this very old school take to himself. It's lovely. I mean, it's very old fashioned, but it's the film has avoided stuff like that, and yet when it gets the opportunity to do it, It just goes for it, which is very crowd pleasing.
And she jumps in jokes. I'm going to change my name to Susan B. Anthony. And, and we'll, don't expect me to be like some housewife now, but
it's funny because you listen to Nick talk about it, and he goes, I even knew when I was writing that stuff, like what she shouldn't be going back there. Like, a modern woman has no place in Victorian England.
Right.
But he goes, but the movie demands it. The people eating the popcorn demand it. You have to deliver on that in whatever way you can. And that in and of itself is a romantic way of looking at this moment that I admire. So.
Mm-hmm. And and the movie closes with saying that they got married, and H.G. Wells went on to write about socialism, global war, space travel, and women's liberation. So that is Time After Time, and that is our fantastic double feature.
Did you know any of the other things that composer won the Oscar for?
No, I'd have to look it up.
I started to look here. And then we got talking about other things. So
just curious, because I don't know him.
Because I'm
woefully terrible about Golden Age Hollywood, as you know.
He let's see.
Better.
His first nomination was To Be or Not to Be in 1942. There's no great list here that says
Lombardo's last film,
Double Indemnity. And For the Woman of the Town.
That one I've heard of.
Those were just nominations. So did he ever?
Well, he could have won for things he was nominated for.
Another Oscar nominated was for The Killers in 46.
I know that one too, really well, actually.
He wrote the theme for Dragnet.
Nice.
So that's another one that we would know. Yeah, he wrote a whole bunch of stuff here.
It's cool. I just give a shout out to him because I breezed right past that.
Yeah,
so.
I think the music's great. I think
it's fantastic. It's not quite the game-changing star of the show like it is in Somewhere in Time. It is fantastic old-fashioned musical score.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And Meyer's sense to keep it old-fashioned even in the future, it pays off. Of course, that's not all his idea. That was the style of the event film music at the time. Was this?
Yeah.
Orchestral, like that had happened in the late 70s, that switched back to the old school orchestral score from all these experiments that had been doing in the early 70s.
Mm-hmm.
What I find really striking about that is that by keeping that score, it keeps the film from feeling dated.
Yeah.
If it had some 70s disco, and there are a few shots where they're actually
just
in the club,
enough so that you know where you are,
what time period,
Mm-hmm.
But because he didn't fill the soundtrack with that, it doesn't feel dated, really.
It's really, it does feel a little dated because by the time we meet John Leslie Stevenson in the future, he's adapted to the full-on bell-bottom.
He is absolutely home.
Saturday Night Fever.
He is home.
Suit.
Yeah.
Which is funny because David Warner is the least fashion-averse person in history. If it was cool to wear an ascot for a couple years there, he wore ascots everywhere he went. He literally just is whatever the next thing is. So it's very cool to see, buttoned up Malcolm McDowell, with his who doesn't change a lick the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
When you first see Stevenson, just the way he's moving through the room, like he's a modern man. It's very cool. So that's a cool movie, and we think that's a great double feature.
Yeah.
We were debating a little what order it should go in, but I really stand by the action-y stuff, the big third act action ending, like the Time After Time to me is the later night movie. It's the after you've had the big heavy experience. This is the one you sort of cool off and relax a little bit with.
Yeah,
I think they play great in that order. But
that makes sense.
Rob, you and your son watched them in the other order. So.
Yeah, we did. And George preferred Time After Time, actually.
Not so much what you prefer as to kind of the flow of the thing.
It's a little, but I think I saw Somewhere in Time. I was probably 9 years old. It became one of my favorite movies. So same time I saw Time After Time became
Me
one
too,
of my favorite movies.
I saw
Very
them. Not they weren't
influential.
new, but they were just a couple years old.
Yeah.
Saw them in the home
When,
video. Era.
you know, anytime I started dating someone new, I showed them Somewhere in Time.
Yeah, you did.
Because if they didn't like that, they're not on the same romantic wavelength I am.
Yeah.
Might as well get this out of the way
Yep.
in a hurry. You're thinking.
Nice.
You got some questions for us, Joel?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I had some stuff about paradoxes and stuff, but we're gonna do. It's a brand new feature to the movie show with Joel and Ryan. It is called Dr. Clock's Timegorious Mindscrambula.
I hope there won't be math involved.
Time. It's even worse than I had imagined. Gonna go back in time. Their very presence could cause a great big ripple effect throughout time itself. Gonna go back in time. Oh, that's bad.
Is this revenge against me for making these so long in the first
I'm
place?
afraid the intro is all we'll have time for.
Honest to God, I did not realize it was. I mean, I made the thing this morning, and I did not realize it was that long.
My favorite Rob Schneider part ever.
It's not Rob Schneider. It's Kevin Nealon. Kevin Nealon and
That who did that? I always pictured that as Schneider.
Nope, Kevin Nealon and
Well, that's good because
Dana
now I can
Carvey.
go back to not liking Rob Schneider for anything, which is
Yep.
what I vastly preferred. All right, cool. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'll do this since we are talking about double features and everything. If you had a time machine, now we're not going to talk about paradoxes or anything else or the effect on anything. If you had a time machine and could go back in time and see a double feature. So this is, you have to think about like two movies that would be would be at like a drive-in at the same time. Is there a double feature that you would have loved to have seen?
Is that a name a movie? That question in disguise.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, but it's
something come
it's
to
more
mind,
of an
Rob?
event.
It's
more of an event. It's like, is there something that was like an event? I remember when I was a kid seeing Conan the Barbarian followed by E.T. Actually, it was E.T. followed by Conan the Barbarian. But
like
yes, yeah.
I think I would go back to time, and the first film would have been just about leaving theaters, and the other one just arriving. And I'd go back and see Time After Time and Somewhere in Time together. And
that's a good one.
That's a
really show about that.
That's a really good double feature.
Yeah, very, very cool.
Okay, here I'll make it.
If I could recreate anything, I mean, the place I would go is Sacramento, California. That's where I was the day that Empire Strikes Back came out.
Great.
I was on vacation in California, and we were visiting friends in Sacramento, and we gotta go see Star Wars 2. That's what we were calling it because we hadn't wrapped our brains around what it was actually called. Star Wars 2 is coming out. We gotta see Star Wars 2. The whole trip, just gotta go see Star Wars 2. Whatever. This wasn't really opening day. It was the Wednesday after opening weekend or something. And fortunately, we showed up at this friends of the family or whatever, and their kid had been promised he could go see it this day. So even though they had said, we're not seeing movies on vacation or whatever, parents are so stupid. Star Wars 2. Star Wars 2! What are you it's not just a movie. It's everything. Screw the vacation. Like, truly, screw Disneyland. Nobody cares about any of this stuff. We've got to go see Star Wars 2. So... And I'll never forget that moment in that theater at that time. That I've never experienced anything like it. The kids in that theater, and they were adults, but it was off the hook. It was like you could have got electrocuted just by touching another person. We were bouncing off the walls with just completely untethered like excitement over this thing we were about to watch, and then although we were all a little gobsmacked by the end of it, because it has a pretty downbeat ending, if you recall. Speaking, Rob, of going out the theater at the end.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, you were so exhilarated by it and so amazed by it. And you right then, that's when it started. You got to get the figures and I got to get to Tauntaun and we're going to do this and we're going to reenact this film for the next 7 years, basically. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was neat that I remember that and that knew sort of enough to savor it at the time. But there are other favorites where I saw them and I didn't know what I was experiencing. And you grow with movies. We talked about that on the show. I wish I could see Summer of '82, which you're talking about. I wish I could see a double bill of Wrath of Khan and Blade Runner, maybe Blade Runner and The Thing. Although I never saw The Thing in the theater, and I don't think I'd want to. It feels like a movie that's better off on your TV at home in the middle of the night.
Going back to what you're saying about a movie growing with you, I saw Murder by Decree in the theater.
79.
I think I was too young, but it made a big impression. I loved it.
That's a film that very much goes to the ones we're talking
so
about
much
right
more
now.
of it. Yeah.
Was that my number one or number two? Number one.
It was up
Sherlock
there.
Holmes film.
Yeah.
That was very cool.
It lives up to that. It is very, very good. I don't know if it's number one. I've only seen my part of the Sherlock Holmes films that have ever been made, but of the ones I've seen, that's my favorite. That's a great one.
Well, there you go. Excellent. We're gonna do it.
Gonna go back in time.
All right. So that was Dr. Clock's Timegorious Mindscrambula. Soon to become a fan favorite here on the movie show with Joel and Ryan. All right, I think that is going to do it for us for this week. Again, Rob, thank you so much for joining us, and what a wonderful and thank you for bringing this topic to us, this idea of a double feature and talking about these two really super fun films.
Well, and clearly we can make a show out of it, so there'll be more double features with Rob episodes in the future for sure, because I had a lot of fun talking about these two.
Great. That sounds awesome. All right, friends. Thank you all so much for joining us this week. Again, you can reach out to us. Do you have a favorite double feature? Do you want to tell me about how much you love Dr. Clock's Timegorious Mindscrambula? You can reach out to us at the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on Facebook, at Ask Joel and Ryan on Twitter and Instagram, and the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on YouTube, which if you are watching this, you are already there. Go ahead, click that like and subscribe. All right, folks, thank you all so much for joining us this week. And until next time, have a wonderful 4th of July, and we'll see you later.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Remember, all views and opinions represented in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the speaker and do not represent those people, institutions, or organizations that the speaker may or may not be associated with, unless explicitly stated. None of these views and opinions were intended to malign or deceive. And now, here's the producers, circa 1982, to play us out.